It's really crazy to think we're coming down the home stretch of the college baseball season. We're in deep April at this point. We've got conference tournaments starting here early May, mid-May, so it's less than a month away. We're back to talk more college baseball with you right here on College Baseball Done Better. I'm Greg Larnerd, along with my man Johnny VTV. We finally have coordinated with the backwards hats today, brother. What's up?
What's up, man? Hope you had a great week. And, it's been rough the last couple weeks on the college dime and been on the wrong side of a lot of blown leads and meltdowns. So just hoping to get right this weekend and just straight up pump the board.
Speaking of fashion, just before we go to pumping anything or any boards or anything along those lines, what is going on with the hat here? Because I also had the strap out on it's not a snapback for you, but the strap back or whatever you want to call it.
The buckle back? I call it
the buckle back. Yeah, I wore one of those to the gym the other day, and I had the strap out like you're having right now. And my girlfriend, I put a video on Instagram, me talking about some nonsense, and she's like, "Oh, sweet strap out. You didn't even tuck the strap in." And I was like, "Is that a thing? Like, I don't know. Have you ever heard that? Because now I didn't notice it, but now I notice it on you. Like, is that the style?"
I don't tuck my straps. The straps are out. And they're hanging out and they're having a good time, dude. Yeah, listen, you have this so you could put the strap out, bro. Like, I don't know what she's talking about. We're not doing the tucking of the strap. We're not starting that trend. So we just ride out what we got right now.
Luckily, that's not a thing in college baseball. Those guys all get fitted caps and they don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But let's talk about some of the slates here. It was interesting in the midweek before we get to these weekend games. You put out something on Twitter, I believe it was, about all of these midweek games in which the favorites lost. Kind of a crazy midweek, was it not last week?
Oh yeah, it was definitely one of the more bizarre midweeks. I think maybe in the entire season. You get one or two of those a year where all the top teams lost, and that's the prime reason I don't bet midweek baseball, because what people don't understand is these teams don't throw their best pitchers. Their weekend rotation is saved for the weekend. Sometimes teams won't play their best batters. They'll reserve some of their best just to keep them fresh for the weekend, because those are the more important series. So it's not worth it. I mean, if anything, and you want to bet it, a lot of times you're better off trying to pick and choose which team you think will pull off an upset. It's just an absolute crapshoot, and you're better off firing at some of these underdogs, because some of them are like plus 220, plus 230. You hit a couple of those, and you're set for the rest of the weekend. I'm just not a fan of. I have to really, really love something in a midweek to play it, like an LSU at minus 150. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not into midweek. You can really get hurt there. I learned it the hard way last year, but just for fun, like about a month ago or so, when I had one of my worst weeks of the year, I was pretty much starting down the week minus 4 units before a weekend game came. And that's a hard hole to dig yourself out of. So it just reminded me of why I don't do it. It's very easy for that to just get away from you.
Yeah, it's very volatile. And speaking from experience and somebody who was a weekday warrior myself, as not somebody who was ever really a constant starter in conference, that was my time to shine in the midweek.
Yeah, Greg Al, you know how it is, bro. I mean, you're an athlete, bro. It was not something that I'm comfortable doing. I don't tell people to bet midweek games. Maybe 2 times this whole year where I was like, you know what, I like a midweek. Let's play it.
All right, let's go to the week.
It's a rare occurrence.
Let's go to the weekend stuff now, and we're gonna start with in the old Sun Belt. You're talking about LSU, and they got upset in the midweek by my former Louisiana Raging Cajun squad, and I've been to many of those games between the Cajuns and LSU, and it's always a big time rivalry there in the boot. But let's go to number 24, Southern Miss, the Golden Eagles. They're underdogs this week at number 10, Coastal Carolina, with the Chanticleers, which we learned last week, if you paid attention, is some sort of a fierce rooster. So talk to us about this game.
Yeah, this was weird. I was just talking about this on my podcast, Breaking Bet, about an hour ago. Coastal Carolina has really shot up the top 25 rankings. They're in definite talks. They look like a real team that might be hosting a region, which is kind of wild for a mid-major program. But this season, there's probably as much parity among these teams as there's been in recent memory. And Coastal Carolina is a team that is built from offense. Offensively, they can outslug just about anybody. And today on the mound, they're throwing Matthew Poduk, who is a New Jersey native. Shout out.
Love that.
So the big thing here is, and one reason why I'm a little nervous about this is because they're going against Southern Miss's Tanner Hall. Tanner Hall at the beginning of the year was a guy who was talked about being maybe a top 5 pitcher off the board. Still probably going to be a first rounder. He's actually had a really good last month or so. Tanner Hall has. But the problem with Southern Miss is they're a team that is built with their pitching staff. So if they get down 4-0, 5-0, it's going to be really hard for them to come back. And my theory was, Tanner Hall has not faced an offense like this, not even close to a Coastal Carolina unit. So despite the fact and the, I guess, excitement and the temptation of taking a Tanner Hall at plus 130, I'm going to side with Coastal. I think they win the series. This is their first real big weekend test of the year. So if they prove their legitimacy by taking the series, then I think it's just going to ultimately continue to bolster their case. And I think they'd off to the hot start tonight. The big reason why I really like Coastal, aside from their offense, they have a really good closer by the name of Teddy Sharkey. The kid is just a competitor. He's been awesome this year. I think he's got 7 or 8 saves on the season. He's the guy that they turn to in the key moments. And I just don't think that the Southern Miss offense is going to be able to keep up. Poduk, he's just got to go out there, give him 5 innings, 2 runs, and let his offense go to work, because ultimately, as this game gets tighter down the stretch, I think Coastal, with their offense and a really good closer, is in favor. I got it at minus 150. I still think minus 160 is fair. I do believe Coastal wins tonight, and I think they take the series.
So you kind of went in and out on me on that one in terms of you like Coastal, then you're like, they haven't really been tested on the weekend all that much, but you really like Coastal. You took them at minus 150. So in terms of your confidence meter and where to take them, where are you on Coastal Carolina? Are you at a 10, or are you at a 7, or are you at a 5? Where are you in terms of this matchup specifically? Yes, tonight.
I would say I'm a 7 on Coastal. And the only reason it's not higher is because of a Tanner Hall. Tanner Hall is without doubt capable of going out 6 shutout innings tonight. That's just the nature of the beast. But I think the Coastal offense will ultimately prove to be too much. If they go against Tanner Hall and they put up 3 or 4 runs on him in 5 or 6 innings, I still like where we're at there. And, to maybe acknowledge the rebuttal that Coastal hasn't faced a pitcher like Tanner Hall, they lit up Levi Wells of Texas State a few weeks ago. Now, Levi Wells isn't on Tanner Hall's level necessarily, but I would still consider Wells a top 20 pitcher in college baseball, arguably. So they've shown that against some of the better arms that they can score. And this team is just impossible, because if they get a quick 3 or 4 spot within 2 innings, it is really difficult for a Golden Eagles team to answer them and counter them, because they're just not offensively driven.
And when you're talking about Matt Poduk, he's somebody who had a terrible outing in his last outing against Old Dominion. I was kind of looking back through their schedule at Coastal Carolina, and they had won a lot of Friday night games or Thursday night games when he started. But the last one against Old Dominion, he got beat up a little bit. So we're thinking, all right, he had one blip on the radar. He's bouncing back. He's getting back on that saddle this week.
Exactly. That was also part of my thinking with Poduk, in a bounce back spot. Listen, Old Dominion is not a really wide known program. The only reason people probably heard of it is because that's where Justin Verlander came from. And Old Dominion this year, they've got a lot of boppers in their lineup. They're towards the top of the lineup in home runs this year. They're a team that can hit and score. And I think, if you get beat by a team like that, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not something where my confidence meter is shaken. It's nothing like what Southern Miss can do. I just think if Tanner Hall gets touched early, it's a huge, huge boost in favor of CCC.
All right, let's go to the next game where we are going to go to the SEC now, and we're going to shift to my home state, an in-state rivalry right now. with the Vanderbilt Commodores visiting Lindsey Nelson Stadium with the very underperforming Tennessee Volunteers right now. The fourth ranked Commodores minus 160 at Tennessee. And I feel like, Johnny, it's been a while since Tennessee's been a home dog. Talk to me about this matchup.
This is a huge series for Tennessee. They have not played well. They've lost 7 of their last 9 weekend games. They haven't won a series in a month since sweeping Texas A&M. And, they're at a real mismatch here against Vanderbilt. It's just so strange because when I looked at the schedule and I saw this, how these two teams are playing, I expected the opposite. I thought Vanderbilt was a team that was overrated. They weren't going to live up to billing this year because their offense really isn't that good. They have a couple guys after Enrique Bradfield Jr., and that's just about it. Their pitching is really what drives this train for Vandy. And, it's been even above what I expected. For the Vanderbilt Commodores, you got Carter Holton going today. And before last week's start against South Carolina, where he probably wasn't right, he shouldn't have pitched because the weekend before that against Mizzou, where he got late scratched with side tightness, he probably got rushed back. And I think, after giving up 4 runs and 2/3 of an inning, Carter Holton is ready to be unleashed again. This Tennessee offense is bad. They lost almost their entire lineup to the draft last year. The one guy you have to worry about in this lineup is Blake Burke. He's got 13 taters on the year. He's a guy that could put a ball 500 feet. He's just like Jack Caglione, but he's not a pitcher. Ultimately here with Tennessee throwing Andrew Lindsey, who has kind of become their Friday guy over the last 2 weeks. They're bumping our guy Chase Dolly to the Saturday role. Chase Burns is out of the lineup of the pitching rotation. Drew Beam is Sunday guy. This is a huge series for Tennessee, but I don't see it. They've done nothing to prove that they're ready to take the next step. Like Tennessee, this is almost a make or break series for them because they're in danger of possibly not even making this tournament. And it's really sad because they haven't shown us anything. They're finding ways to lose games that they shouldn't have lost. And I think ultimately, if Tennessee can get on a run here, kind of remind us of like what Ole Miss did last year and charge in the back 9 and make teams remember who exactly they are, that's something we could talk about. But for this game, I think the pitching matchup is there. I think the way Vanderbilt's rolling, they're 13-2 in SEC play. They have a real shot to win 21, 22 games in the SEC, take the conference. I just think this Commodores team is too overmatching for Tennessee. But I'll say this. There's been a lot of weird line movement on this since last night. So I gave this out at Vanderbilt minus 150 last night. Before I went to bed, I checked it. Vandy was out to minus 180. Woke up this morning, Vandy was down to minus 155, and now currently Vandy's minus 150. So maybe somebody believes in Tennessee and think that they're capable of pulling off this upset. It wouldn't shock me. I just don't know if I can buy it. I want Tennessee to win, but it's almost like rooting for the Tampa Bay Bucks last year. Every time they get a butter matchup, you think, all right, this is the week that they're going to pull it out. I can't bet on them until they show it to me.
And this isn't even a butter matchup. Like, this is a really, really good SEC opponent, and it's just sort of another one in the run of really strong SEC opponents that they've run into. I asked to guy who covers Tennessee on my show this week, I asked him, like, are they just playing really good competition or are they just not that good? And he was like, honestly, like, they just make too many mistakes. Like, they're not that good of a team right now. So it's hard to have a lot of confidence in them. Andrew Lindsey, as you mentioned, he's sort of an unknown name right now, and you just can't bet on them until they really show you something. And they got out to an early lead last week against Hunter Holland in Arkansas. And I was kind of watching that with our parlay and I was a little nervous, but then, Arkansas came back and handled their business. But yeah, it's just hard to trust Tennessee, as you alluded to right now. Let's go to our next game. Let's stick in the SEC and let's go to the number 1 team in the nation, the LSU Tigers. They're heavy favorites at the Ole Miss Rebels plus 185. What do you like about this one? And are we taking this one, taking your guy, Paul Skeens, in this matchup on a Friday night?
Well, first off, let's hope this game gets played tonight. This game got pushed back a couple hours. It's now going off at 9:30 Eastern time. Forecasted with the inclement weather. What else is new? So we really hope this game is played tonight. I don't care if it's played at 11 p.m. Eastern. I really don't care. But I'm not a big person I'm not a big guy that likes to lay these prices, even with the Paul Skeens. If you're gonna do it, I guess, yeah, fine, lay it with LSU. But I like LSU in a parlay leg. Um, Ultimately, I think betting on Paul Skeens is one of my favorite things to do in college baseball. I mean, more times than not, you're going to get a win out of him. He's got 106 strikeouts to 9 walks this year.
Wow.
If LSU makes a deep enough run, Paul Skeens it might log 200 Ks. I think Cooper Jerpy last year for Oregon State, who was a first-round pick to the Cardinals in 2022, he had, I want to say, 162 strikeouts, something along those lines. Skeens is well on his way to shattering that number. I think the Tigers get on track here. They have not looked good. They probably should have lost to South Carolina in a series 2 weeks ago. They should have lost to Kentucky last week. I'm not loving what I'm seeing from LSU. Every series they play, they look more and more vulnerable, and it all comes from their pitching. Their pitching is not good. They have a lot of good arms, but they just have not performed. If it wasn't for Paul Skeens, I don't even know where they would be. They'd be in real trouble. Skeens is the only good thing to come out of this pitching staff right now. So with that being said, I'm throwing LSU in a parlay with Wake Forest tonight. Really hoping this one hits. Rhett Lauder, Paul Skeens, assuming it is Rhett Lauder night, even if it's Sean Sullivan for Wake, I'm not worried about it. But these are one of those that you live for. Butter matchups on both counts with top pitchers going. And I think LSU does win tonight. The big news for Ole Miss is their ace, Hunter Elliott, has returned after being pretty much on the shelf for 2 months with an arm injury. He's slated to go tomorrow. Now, I don't know what kind of pitch count he's on or what have you, but I would probably think Ole Miss takes at least one game in this series. It could be tomorrow with Elliott. Maybe it's Sunday. But I think LSU wins tonight, and I probably would look at backing Ole Miss maybe both days for games 2 and 3 because I think they'll come away with one of them. LSU hasn't swept a series in the SEC this year.
Interesting. Good stuff there, Johnny. But I just want to talk to the Bettor fans for a sec. Attention, Bettor fans. You can now have the Bettor Sports Network newsletter emailed to you every single day. The only place to get your daily Bettor Bet plus exclusive offers, program alerts, special events, and our top moments. Register for free right now at bettorsports.com. And don't forget, check us out on social media at Bettor Network. That's Bettor Network. All right, let's go to our next game, and we'll stick in. We'll go over to the Georgia Tech. What are they? The Yellow Jackets plus 135 at the number 17 ranked Miami Hurricane, and on the heavy favorite line here. What do you like about this matchup?
So Georgia Tech's no slouch. I mean, they're not a good team, but they have some guys that could do damage, mainly Jackson Finley. The guy is approaching 20 home runs. He's one of the better two-way players in college baseball this year. But I got to go with Miami. Miami is right now at a point in their season where they have to keep racking up wins. They're a borderline team that might host a regional. So these are kind of the layups that you have to get if you're the Hurricanes. Sitting at the number 17 ranked team, like if they lost this series, I think they have Louisville next week. These are kind of those key points in the year where, losses mean a little bit more for a fringe team like a Miami. So the issue with them is they are a very roller coaster team. 1 week they come out and they could just look awesome. The next week they could play so flat the way they did against Virginia. I think ultimately after having a big series week win last week against North Carolina, they will come out and take the series against Georgia Tech. I think that starts tonight. I think it's Gage Zeal. It's unconfirmed on the mound for the Canes. It's a good bounce back spot for him. So I think the 165 is fair in this scenario. Miami would be the side for me in this match of ACC opponents.
All right, let's go back to the SEC. Number 3, the Florida Gators are, they're not a favorite on the road, but this should be a really even matchup between them and number 6 South Carolina with the Gamecocks. Talk to me about this matchup because I know you like both of these squads.
Yeah, so this, in my opinion, is the best series of the entire weekend. We have two top six teams, two teams that are probably on my short list that have the capability to win it all. That list is probably about 8 or 9 teams in the entire country. So South Carolina was on my card last night to win. And the main reason why was because the bullpen is a huge advantage in favor of South Carolina. South Carolina has one of the best team ERAs in college baseball, and their starters are not a huge reason why. All their starters, pretty much outside of Noah Hall, have somewhat of a bloated ERA, and Noah Hall's been out for the last few weeks. Um, and especially because Florida was missing their closer, Brandon Neely, who's out for the rest of the series, serving a 4-game suspension, which was really questionable, but that's a different conversation. So it ultimately kind of came out the way I thought. South Carolina takes game one, but the way they lost last night, Florida, it was 3-3 in the bottom of the sixth. Brandon Sproat leaves after giving up a double with 2 outs that might have been foul. Bullpen comes in, completely unravels. They start giving up a couple hits. They walked in 5 straight runs. Ethan Petrie comes up with a 2-run single. The game's blown open. And then before you know it, it's a 13-3 walk-off in the bottom of the 7th. So my whole take was whoever won game one, the opposite team will win game two. Now, this kind of falls into a good strategy because you got Hurston Waldrop on the mound, who's probably going to be a top 3 arm, maybe top 4 off the board this summer. The kid is a strikeout machine. He's pitched really well the last few weeks. The kid has just really started to dial in. This will probably be his biggest test of the year. And you got South Carolina throwing Jack Mahoney, a freshman who's kind of struggled at times. He's hit or miss a little bit. But the big reason why I like Florida tonight is if you look this season, every time they've had a big loss where they've gotten their asses handed to them, the next game they come out and they win. Happened to Miami earlier this year. It happened to Georgia. Happened to Auburn. Tennessee, it happened to. So I think ultimately Florida is the side here at -105. They get back together. Jack Caglione is going to string together some hits. He's not going to strike out 3 times again. Wyatt Langford's going to make some things happen. I think Florida is the right side here, in my opinion.
Slight little underdog to the Gators side, but we'll take it. We'll stick in the SEC now again, and we'll talk a little bit about the Texas A&M Aggies at +130 at number 13 with the Kentucky Wildcats. Talk to us.
Yeah, so Kentucky, they might be legit. I wanted to wait to see when their schedule started to tighten up, how good they really are. And they hung with LSU last week. They probably should have beat them in the series. So even though they lost, it really did some eyebrow raising for me. And, their RPI is number 1 in the country. Whether that's a true one, I'm questioning because they beat some teams at the time that were top 25, but in theory really aren't top 25 teams. But Kentucky has an opportunity here to stack another series win under their belt. Nathan Detmer for A&M, I like him. He's got a lot of talent, but he's so inconsistent. This is a guy who's got over a 5.5 ERA. He's just not been the guy that the A&M Aggies have needed. Their offense is pretty good. They got guys like Hunter Hines. They got Austin Bose. They got Jack Moss. But I think Kentucky is going to find a way. It's what they do best. They don't have anybody that really stands out to you. They're just one of those teams that gets production from everybody in the lineup, everybody in the pitching staff, and they find ways to win games. I actually gave this out at -135 last night because what I always say, get the games the night before because the value is going to be gone by the time you wake up, and that's what happened here. I think Kentucky -165 is probably the highest I will go. So there is still value for this line. I think the Wildcats take the series, and it starts tonight.
Look, don't tell Coach Cal that Kentucky's now becoming a baseball school as well, because he's not going to like to hear that, obviously, with Stoops talking about how it's a football school and he's at the basketball school. So Kentucky athletics have gotten better over the last couple of years and really caught up to where basketball was. All right, let's go to our final game. The Washington Huskies, they're +150 as an underdog, and they're going to travel to number 9, Stanford, with the Cardinals. Talk to us about this one.
I want to take Washington. It's unconfirmed who they're starting. I don't know if they're going to go Kiefer Lord. Kiefer Lord's kind of been the game 2 guy the last few weeks just because he hasn't been his best. So it's probably going to be Stu Flensland III, who the lefty, who's actually pretty solid. And for him to come out and have a solid performance wouldn't be surprising. But Stanford's coming off a series loss, coming off a midweek loss. I think with Quinn Matthews on the mound, who was terrific last week against Oregon, I think Stanford here at minus 185 is the right side. And I think you could throw Stanford in a parlay. But, as soon as I say that, watch Washington come out and get the game one win, because that's how it works. But I think Stanford's got the advantage here. They are the better team. They have the better pitcher, and they have a reason to come out and be pissed off and play like it.
So if you didn't really take any big time underdogs, if there were an underdog you would take this week, would it be Washington?
I have to
Out
get
of our slate that we've talked about?
Well, actually, it's funny you ask. So last night, on my play, one of my plays was West Virginia. I got them at plus 130 against TCU. West Virginia is one of these scrappy teams. They have a really good bat by the name of J.J. Weatherholt, who's probably going to be a first rounder next year. I believe he's back. There was an aggressive movement from West Virginia at plus 130 last night to minus 105 when he woke up this morning. I probably wouldn't play West Virginia at that price, but I think they are definitely capable of pulling off the upset against a TCU team that has been hugely disappointing. I think for me that's a fair number here.
All right. So before we get to, these future bets that we want to talk about, if you had to build us a little bit of a parlay for this night tonight, I always like to ask that. What would you build for us in terms of a little bit of a parlay? Because I heard you got some good confidence in Coastal, put LSU, Wake Forest in a parlay. Seemed like you like Miami and Kentucky, and on the underdog side, you liked Florida.
Yeah, so the game typically what I like to do, I like to do in a parlay my favorite games, my most sure games, less of a toss up.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I'm skimping out on more of a payout. So today, a 3-teamer with LSU, Wake, and Campbell. Campbell's got High Point. Everybody knows how much I love my Camels. That 3-teamer pays 139. I actually do believe college baseball is one of those sports that parlays could be a plus EV play, because especially now, over the last month, we've seen a lot less run lines and a lot less totals given out on sports books, which has really changed the way you cap it. So in order to, get on this value, because, laying minus 180, minus 190 a lot of the times is not going to be something that's going to pan out for you, just because there are a lot of upsets in this game. There's things that don't happen the way you think it's going to. So I think ultimately parlays are a way to, capture more equity. And it's a rare thing. But in this game, I do think it is a plus EV play in a lot of situations. So those 3 I like. And then maybe, you take a shot with like LSU, Coastal Carolina, and a Vanderbilt. I'd probably build these parlays out tonight in groups of 2 or 3. I wouldn't go too big. I like to keep it a little bit smaller in terms of the amount of teams I put in there.
All right, let's talk a little bit about these future bets here. And I know you and I have kind of volleyed these around the last couple of weeks, but you really wanted to talk about some of these futures that we see here, and the 3 teams that you really like: Wake 10-1, Campbell 75-1, and then Coastal 100-1. Talk to us.
Yeah, so Wake Forest, I've been pushing Wake Forest all year.
Yep.
The week before the Super Bowl, I had my guy Joe Doyle on, who is an incredible college baseball mind. And we're kind of going over the lines. We both kind of nodded at Wake Forest at 40-1. They were 40-1. Now imagine that to how they've been playing. And, I'm kicking myself because I didn't take Wake Forest at 40-1. And the only reason I didn't was because, I wanted to save my bank a little bit. I had the Super Bowl coming up, and I wanted to, see where I was at after that. It moved a couple days later, though. I didn't have really a chance to do it. So when I gave it out, Wake Forest moved from 40-1 to 25-1 pretty much within 36 hours. Now, I don't know if it's because we were talking about it on my podcast or what, but it was crazy. So Wake Forest was a team I really captured a lot with 25-1, and I've just been hitting them along the way. I think they are the best team in college baseball. I think they're better than LSU. I don't think there's a team that has a better pitching staff than them front to back. They have one of the top 2 closers in the country in Camden Minacci. They have the best starting rotation with Rhett Lauder, Sean Sullivan, Josh Hartle. They have an elite 1-5 lineup with a guy who's going to be a top 5 pick next year, first rounder. I don't know if Brock Wilken is eligible this year or next year, but he's probably going to be a first rounder. They have a really good leadoff guy who plays center field, Tommy Hawk, and they're missing one of their best bats in Adam Cecere. So, Wake Forest to me is so deep. They can beat you so many ways. They're so versatile, and they are the best team. And I think 10-1 is still value. In my opinion, they should be 7-1. So I would probably take a shot on the Demon Deacons now before that just gets even lower.
So you want to take a shot with the Demon Deacons, also those other 2 teams as well with Campbell and Coastal?
Yeah, Campbell is a team that I really fell in love with last year. They were so good. And, I said it a lot that if Campbell it's all about draws and matchups when you get to the playoffs. Campbell got the worst possible draw you could have asked for. They had to play Tennessee on the road, and they held their own in that region. Campbell was an absolute handful for the Volunteers. If they were in any other region, I believe they win. They go to the Super Regionals, and they might even have went to the College World Series. That team was loaded. And it's evident they had 2 first-rounders. And one of their first-rounders, Zach Nito, got called up to the Angels. He played 44 games in the minors. That's what Campbell had at starting shortstop is one of their best players. So I was on them at 300-1 earlier in the year, and I've been hitting them a lot at 100-1, 90-1. I'm really invested in the Campbell Camels. They're not as good as they were last year, but they're still pretty good. They're going to have a top 5 offense in a lot of major categories when the season's said and done. The big thing is their pitching. Can their pitching meet their hitting halfway? Because the teams that win the College World Series or make it far have pitching. Now, Campbell's got an ace by the name of Cade Cooler, possible first rounder this year. Absolutely love what I'm seeing from him. And, it's if the number 2s and 3s and the bullpen can kind of tighten it up and play really well down the stretch. Because if that's the case, this Campbell team will go to the College World Series. They can go toe-to-toe with anybody.
Yeah, I remember seeing their metrics last year in that regional against Tennessee in the Knoxville regional. And the hitting was superb, but the pitching was really, really tough. And then lastly, Coastal, you wanted to kind of hit on them a little bit. I know you've been kind of talking them up all season long as well.
Yeah, so Coastal and Campbell are almost identical. Both loaded on offense, questionable pitching. The only difference is Campbell's got a true stud ace with no closer, and Coastal doesn't have a true stud, but they have a true stud starter, but they have a stud closer. I think Coastal, who is now number 10 ranked, who's probably going to host a regional the way it's going, they're a team that I don't think is going to win it all. I just don't think they have enough horses to win it all. But I bet them, and I was tweeting them out last week. I hit them twice at 200-1. Tweeted it out. I went on VSiN. I talked about it. The next day, Coastal is at 100-1, so cut in half. I still think there's value there because, in my opinion, they should be about 90-1, maybe 85. This team is similar to Campbell, where if they get the right draw, they can go very far. So my theory is taking Coastal where they are. You want them to get the good draw, host a regional, play a cupcake regional schedule, get to the supers, and then ideally, depending on what happens there, maybe you hedge out of it. Because I'm in a lot of potential payout. I can create a lot of equity out of that ticket, which anybody else can if they're betting Coastal at 100-1. So I would look at it that way, where maybe you bet against them in the supers, depending on what the prices are, and if you get a series price, whatever the case may be. But having that ticket in your back pocket is not something that is the worst case scenario, because at the end of the day, if Coastal made World Series, which for me would be awesome, it wouldn't be surprising because Coastal won it in 2016. And if their starters start to bring it together a little bit, anything can happen. It is all matchup based. And for my money, Coastal is one of the best offenses in the entire nation.
Should be fun. Good to always look at those futures, and we got a really good slate of games this weekend. Johnny, enjoy them. Find them on Twitter @_JohnnyVTV. I'm glad to see you're home. I miss the Italian flag, so always good to see your face, my man.
You too, bro. I mean, just gotta say, like, what is this? A handsome contest? I think we gotta go
Always.
hit
I
a. We
was
gotta go. The boys gotta go hit a runway after this. Go do some modeling for Vogue or GQ.
That's funny enough. I actually, I have done some modeling in my lifetime.
Have you?
Yeah, I have.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Look how handsome this kid is.
You know, late bloomer. We aged like fine wine. You should have seen me. I was fat and overweight when I was a kid.
Now look at you. You look like when
I know.
Squidward got handsome.
I'm Greg Larnerd. He's Johnny VTV. We'll catch you next week on College Baseball Done Better.